Hey everybody, how's it going? My name's Tom. I work at Valve. I've been there for about 6 years, and during that time I've always worked on the Steam business team. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really grateful to Dev.Play and the organization for inviting me. This is my first time in Romania, so really excited to be here. I'm going to be talking about a lot of Steam-specific topics. But my hope for this talk is that even if your game is going to launch on other PC game stores or on consoles or on mobile, I'm hoping that a lot of the information and general ideas here are going to be useful and helpful to you as you're working on shipping a game. And maybe that's useful whether you're part of a bigger studio with 50 or 100 or 500 employees, and hopefully that's also useful if you're working by yourself out of your mom's basement. So the very first thing we should really start with before I talk at you a bunch is a big question for all of you to lend a little bit of perspective. And I think that big question is, why are you making the game that you're making? And I think that question is super important. Again, if you're part of a studio and you have 50 employees and you want to make sure that they have health insurance and get paid on time, and it's just as important of a question if you're working by yourself and you're just working on an art project that you don't think anybody will ever see, you still need to ask this question, and you still need to focus back on it when you get feedback or advice or think about the decisions and trade-offs that you're making. Just a couple days ago or yesterday on Twitter, I saw something that Jake posted that kind of made me smile, and I asked him if I could use it for the talk. There's this interesting Venn diagram. Ooh, I've got a laser. So up here is the game you want to make. Over here is games with an actual market. And then on the other side is games that you have the ability or the resources or the time to make. And ideally, maybe there's some little sweet spot right there in the middle that hits all those things. But that's not a requirement, right? If you're way up here in a game that you want to make and you don't think anybody will ever buy it and you don't yet have the skills or resources to make it, that's fine. There's no requirement that you narrow yourself to this one little spot. But you do need to think carefully about where you are on that map as you make design trade-offs and as you work on your game. Every data point, every piece of advice you get at a talk, every trade-off you make as you build your game, they all need to run through the filter of your game and your goals, because there's not one right path. It's fine to build a game that you don't really have a business plan for, but you might also not have a big expectation of sales or profit if you're not doing that work up front. So there's no right or wrong way, but make sure you're filtering back through your game and your goals. I'm going to cover 3 big topics. First one is kind of timeline, how Steam has grown and changed over the last few years. There's a lot of upside there and a lot of things that are really scary and intimidating. There's sort of a practical portion of the talk where we'll talk about how to make the most of that new landscape. And then finally, if we have time, we'll look at some new and upcoming Steamworks tools and features. So we're going to jump right in to talk about how the Steam landscape has changed. And it's no secret that there have been a ton of changes. We're going to, again, talk kind of about Steam here, but this is pretty much true on an accelerated or decelerated timeline for almost everywhere else you might hope to sell your game. So back in 2014, I asked a colleague, a designer, to help me sort of put everything into one visual explanation of how Steam has changed. And if you go back to 2014, there were fewer game creators in the market. They were making fewer games. They had fewer tools, and it was a less diverse creative group. And we at Valve didn't have really the tools or resources to support all the massive games that would be coming in the future anyway. All of the games being made filtered through a fairly narrow pipeline and showed up on a fairly static store, which meant that no matter where you were on the planet, no matter what you liked to play or what language you spoke, you were going to see pretty much the same 10 or 12 games on Steam, no matter what. That left a lot of creators out, and it also left a lot of customers out. Fast forward to now, there's obviously dramatically more games being made all the time, and we've changed the Steam platform and tools to accommodate a bigger flow of content and also make the store more dynamic. So depending on your own personal taste, you're going to see a super different experience on Steam, and we think that we know that that's led to a lot more game purchases and playtime and a lot more customers on the platform to support the huge influx in developers. So now we'll break down some of the data behind this pretty little graph. In the pre-Greenlight era, I'm not sure, did anybody in this room submit a game to Greenlight by chance? Okay, some OG. even before Greenlight, you submitted your game to sort of the black box of the Steam team at Valve. You'd have months of uncertainty, and maybe someday you'd hear back and be allowed to launch your game on Steam. We were releasing about 5 games a week at that time, so maybe 1 per workday. Then in the Greenlight era, the uncertainty was a little lower. You had a little bit more insight. You had a little bit more control over the process as a developer. But there was still weeks or sometimes months of uncertainty. And at that point, we were releasing maybe 70 games a week towards the end of Greenlight. Now, with Steam Direct, you can jump in online, onboard yourself, fill out some paperwork, and shortly after, release your game when you're ready. That's an awesome amount of freedom and gives a lot more predictability, but it's also led to way more games coming out every week on Steam. There's no denying that fact. The really interesting thing is thinking, okay, what does that mean for your product, and what does that mean for the platform? So here's the good news. There are a lot more customers on Steam buying and playing games, and more games and developers are finding success now than before. We'll look at sort of the data to break that down. That's not a promise that your game will find success. It's an incredibly competitive market. You should go in with your eyes wide open, that not all games are going to turn a profit, and it's very difficult to find commercial success. So if that's what you're looking for, commercial success, you're going to need to do a lot of work and probably have a little luck along the way as well. But hopefully talks like this will help you get there. So here's what Steam's growth looks like. I'm going to go really fast through these so we can get to the more practical stuff. Steam's peak concurrent users and daily active users have more than doubled in the last 4 years. We've seen amazing growth in mature regions like the North America, Europe scene, and dramatic increases in new users from Turkey, China, South America, etc. And Steam itself is way more diverse. There are a couple products up here made by developers in Romania, but there's a bunch of games on Steam that probably never would have had a commercial market and maybe never would have even been conceived 5 years ago that are now available on the platform and finding a ton of customers. That diversity has been great for the platform. Again, to bring it back here, we used to have a small number of games filtering through a very narrow funnel. We've now got way more games and a much more diverse way of showing them off to customers, which has led to some really interesting customer-facing results. This is a graph of annual new games bought per customer on Steam. So to break it down, in 2010, a customer might buy an average of, and this is an average, of course, maybe 3 games a year. In 2016 and 17, that topped out more like 8.5 or 9. Hopefully in 2018, it'll keep going up. So there's way more transacting and game acquisition happening now than before, which is great. There's also way more successful releases. This graph charts the number of games earning $100,000 US in their first 30 days after release on Steam, and that includes early access as a release. As you can see, from about 2014 to the end of 2017, that number had doubled. We think that's a really good sign. Now, not every studio can subsist on $100,000 in its first 30 days. That might be beyond your wildest dreams, or that might be total disaster. The important takeaway is more games are able to hit these numbers than before. And if you bump up the level to 1 million, the graph curve stays pretty much the same. There are more games finding these critical levels of success than before. Again, that's not a promise that your game is guaranteed to make $1 million in its first 30 days. But we're excited that far more creators and studios are able to hit those marks now than before. So yes, there are tons more games being made. There's no getting away from that fact. But there's a ton of new players on Steam, and there's also more ways for them to find and play more games. So the opportunity has never been bigger. We're going to pivot now to how your game can kind of make the most of that opportunity. I'm going to go through a lot of features and tools fairly quickly, but if you're already a Steamworks partner or you're thinking about joining Steam in the future, most of the breakdown and info can also be found in our documentation and tutorial videos. So if I'm rushing, don't worry, you can look a lot of this stuff up on our site. So we're going to talk about 5 big things: localization, translating your game, Steam curators, the Steam wishlist, 2 newer features, Steam broadcasting, and then also a little reminder not to forget the basics of your product marketing. Localizing is super important, more so now than ever before. Translating your game into other languages is a really important component, and there's a couple of facts that a lot of people miss or just don't realize about Steam. First one is that all Steam accounts have language preferences. If you don't make any changes, this will just be your default language that you signed up with your Steam account in, but you can also choose secondary languages. And customers will mostly see recommendations for games that have interface support in their languages. So adding interface support to your game directly leads to more customers discovering it and seeing it on the store page. One important fact is that less than a third of Steam customers have their primary language set as English. So if English is the only language your game supports, you're missing out on a massive portion of the market. And as a reminder, if your game doesn't support a player's language, they're significantly less likely to see it. They might still see it if it's a bestseller, or all their friends are playing it, or it's recommended by curators they follow. But if I'm a customer who only speaks Japanese and views the Steam store in Japanese, and your game doesn't support Japanese, it's much less likely I'll ever see it. Here's the primary language of Steam players. I goofed my labels, it looks like, in the top corner there. The big corner here is simplified Chinese. That is a new and significantly grown market on Steam. The bottom half here where the label is goofed up is actually English. So as you can see, there's a really big stretch of simplified Chinese users. That doesn't guarantee that this will match the revenue that your game generates necessarily. This is also not country specific, so there are a lot of users who view the Steam store in Russian even though they're in a different territory, for instance. Brazilian Portuguese. The language itself is Portuguese, but Brazilian Portuguese. There's also some hidden benefits of localization. Localizing your game will lead to some interesting downstream effects, and one of the big ones is it'll make you think about the diversity of your customers, how different they can be, and how they access and interpret your game. So one of the big things about that particular slide is that a lot of times your game will have characters or jokes or elements that will make no sense or even be hostile or unfriendly to gamers in other parts of the world. So a lot of times localizing your game into another language will make you realize, wow, this actually won't play well in major markets that I'm trying to target. There's also some interesting ongoing work in terms of making your game accessible. It's great to localize, the user interface, and if that's all you do, that's something. But it's also worth thinking about localizing social media posts and marketing outreach to other territories and announcements that you do for major events in your game. The next thing we're going to talk about is curators. This is a relatively new feature to Steam that helps customers discover games. It's all about game discovery being assisted by non-Valve human curation. That's something that a lot of people really crave, partly because of trust. It's easier to trust something when you say, wow, that streamer that I really admire and respect, she likes this game, so that gives me a little more confidence that it's going to be good. It also makes sure that it's not a small number of people in Seattle, Washington, making decisions about what a good game is. That doesn't serve our customers, and it certainly doesn't serve all of you. So we've tried to add as many non-Valve voices to the store to help recommend games to customers. That serves a lot of existing and new personalities. It provides better support for niche games and subgenres of games that might be kind of narrowly defined. And we recently added Curator Connect. Curator Connect is a way for you to send your game directly to curators in Steam. And here's what it looks like in the developer view. You as a developer can search for specific Steam curators by a number of different factors. You can search by curator name, by what sort of tags the curator often plays or recommends, what languages they speak, what operating system, VR or not, etc. So you can help get your game in front of the right audience on Steam. And that has a huge impact on what a user sees. This is a screenshot that I took yesterday of my own Steam store page. This game, Wandersong, was recommended by a curator that I follow called Designer Plays, and you can see that recommendation in the corner. Since I follow that curator, games they recommend show up on the top main carousel scrolling main cap, as we call it, on the front page of my store all the time. So getting a curator recommendation has a significant and direct impact on what customers see on the front page. There are more than 260 curators with more than 10,000 followers. There are a lot of customers who follow at least one curator, and amazingly, of the 10 biggest curators, 8 of them use languages other than English. So a little callback to localization and sort of the changing demographics and broadening demographics of the marketplace. Definitely something to think about. We're going to talk about wish lists next. Just out of curiosity, does anybody add stuff to their Steam wish list? Okay, that's awesome. That makes me feel way better. I won't talk too much about what wish lists are. But from the perspective of helping you sell your game, they're built on the reality that customers learn about your game in 1,000 different places. And we totally get that at Valve. We don't think that the Steam store is the end-all, be-all of game discovery curation. People will find out about your game on Twitter. They'll find out about it on YouTube or Twitch or Mixer or Caffeine or any number of other interesting places. They'll see ads on websites. They'll have their friends talking about it. A kid on the school bus will tell them about an interesting game. And that impact or that realization about your game might happen before your game is actually available for sale. So ideally, you're getting and gathering Steam wishlists even before your game is available for sale. This is what the Steam wishlist looks like to a customer. We provide a bunch of tools and filters so that customers can add the list of games they're interested in, and this fills in a bunch of other discovery information for customers as they use the store. If your game right now is not out, but you want to be talking about it, you want to be getting in front of it, customers, add this game to your wish list is a very concrete, measurable action that you can take, and it can make a big difference as you market your game before release. We also provide some tools and charts to help you actually measure what marketing efforts are causing the biggest uptick in wish lists. So here's what that looks like in our backend. You can track daily wish list actions. For this particular product page, there's this huge spike in new wishlist additions in the middle of April in this example. You want to be able to look back and say, okay, what was I doing at that time? Did Rami like a tweet and then suddenly people found out about my game? Did I pay for an ad that week? Is that the day that my game just launched and became available for sale and got on people's radars? You can track what you're doing that's actually yielding positive results and make some big progress from that. There's also a ton of downstream benefits. As you know, if you've added a game to your Steam wishlist, we send wishlist notifications via email and the Steam mobile app if a game on your wishlist is launches or goes on discount. We build special sections into all of our big seasonal sales. So when the autumn and winter sales happen in a couple months here, there will be a dedicated section to show off games on the wishlist to customers. And you'll also see the update visibility rounds when games ship a major announcement update. We plumb through any games on your wish list to show you those on the front page. So gathering wish lists is a huge way to measure the impact of your marketing and has a bunch of downstream effects to help you sell the game. Broadcast is the next thing we'll talk about. This feature has existed on Steam for a long time, but it started as basically a one-to-one broadcast experience. So if I'm playing a game and I want to show my friend this really cool boss fight, I could broadcast to her and she could watch it. Broadcasting is now available as a developer-level feature, so you can broadcast gameplay to your Steam store page, like this example, or to a publisher or developer homepage if you've built one of those on Steam. There's moderated chat, which customers can turn on or off. And you can simultaneously broadcast to more than one page. So if you have a game and a sequel, or a game and an expansion DLC, or whatever the case may be. Broadcasting helps you, on Steam, helps you multiply the upside of existing streaming efforts. So if you're already, paying someone to stream your game on Twitch, or you're doing a big, launch day broadcast on Mixer or Caffeine or anywhere else, you can also pipe that through to Steam. You don't have to rely on Steam exclusively. You can also plan your broadcasting, like I said, around any launches or in-game events, or if you're running a sale or a discount. You also have the tools inside of Steam to choose which accounts can broadcast directly to your store page. So you can elevate any of the people on your team, or if there's a community member or a friend who happens to be really good at streaming, you can add their account so they broadcast on your store page. And this is what it looks like in action. This game, Nimbus, came out, I think, yesterday, possibly the day before. It's in early access. No one at Valve sponsored this game or gave it extra marketing. We didn't sign some special deal with them to do anything. They launched their game and did incredibly well, and I think one of the reasons why was doing this awesome dev live broadcast during their launch. So you can see this is the top of their store page. If a customer scrolled down, they'd see the option to buy the game and user reviews and everything else. They're live chatting with customers who are watching, and if a lot of customers tune in to watch your broadcast, we automatically pipe it through to the front page of Steam. So again, this screenshot I took last night on my laptop. This game had a lot of people watching their stream, so we automatically gave them front page positioning. Those tools are available to you right now. You can do it for an unreleased game, for a game that came out 5 years ago. If customers are excited about it, it'll show up on the front page of Steam automatically and pretty much instantly, which is really cool. Finally, don't forget the basics. Forgive me if you're working at a 500-person studio and you have an entire team of people working on this, it's probably not that relevant for you. If you're working in a basement by yourself, making your own game, it might be a huge difference maker. There are a couple basic marketing pieces, the short description and your capsule art that I'm going to look at really quickly here. So for your short description, you're basically looking to have like a tweet-length explanation of why your game is special. You want this to be super to the point and super accessible. One of the things we see developers do sometimes, or a classic failure case, is they'll jump in on the deep end. They'll provide a bunch of narrative exposition or a really, really granular breakdown of the game, which is so confusing to customers that it basically serves no purpose. This is your chance to set expectations and clarify some information for your customers. So you definitely want to workshop it, practice it, translate it into as many languages as you can, and make it accessible. In terms of capsule art, sort of your branding images, these are, again, essential whether you're on Steam or itch or the App Store or anywhere else. You want your game name to be easy to read and instantly recognizable, and simple is fine. You don't need to spend $10,000 and 40 hours workshopping the perfect capsule art. It's okay if it's really simple, as long as it's easy to read and easy to recognize. There's a couple great examples where I think capsule art and short description play well together. One of them is Megaquarium. This game just came out recently. So the short description reads, a theme park management tycoon game with an aquatic twist. Even if that's all you knew about this game, it's kind of enough to know, like, oh, I can imagine playing that. I get what this game is about. The capsule art is super kind of light and low touch. It's really instantly recognizable and easy to read. It sort of keys the user into, hey, this is a little bit more like casual game. It clearly captures the personality of the product. Another one that I really like that's actually much more intense and old is RimWorld. This description reads, a sci-fi colony sim driven by an intelligent AI storyteller. And the RimWorld dev goes on to list all of these specific things. Generate stories by simulating psychology, ecology, gunplay, melee combat, climate, biomes, etc., etc. If reading that kind of overwhelms you and makes you think, whoa, this game might be a little much for me, that's kind of fine. This short description totally sets expectations. And if you've played RimWorld, you know, like, it's not a super casual, just pick up and play 5 minutes game. It's crazy deep. And it's fine if your short description makes that really clear. In fact, that's what it should do. Also, again, this capsule art is not super fancy art. It probably didn't take, a ton of resources to make, but it's really recognizable and it makes the name of the game crystal clear. So in review, localization and curators and wish lists are hugely valuable tools on Steam. If you're selling your game on other stores or consoles or platforms and they let you take advantage of things like this, absolutely do it. Broadcasting on Steam helps attract customers and keep them on your store page longer so they can learn about your game and see it in the best light. And don't forget the basics. Your capsule art and short description, those are going to be seen more often than any other asset you make. And I don't say that to be depressing, like no one's going to play your game, but the number of impressions your small capsule or large capsule gets on store pages will dramatically outstrip, the credits or your start menu. So it's worth spending time and making sure that you really nail it. I only have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to fly through these. One thing I want to say in case I talk too long and get cut off, I'll be here the rest of the day, and I'll plan on just floating around behind the auditorium here. Please come up and say hello, introduce yourself to me. I'd love to talk about your game. I'd love to hear your questions about why does Steam do this or why doesn't Steam do that. So feel free to come say hi. A few things we're working on. A big one is the Steam Input API. This is a tool set that lets you write controller integration once and then sort of abstracts that out to lots of other controller types. So it works with the Steam controller, Xbox, PlayStation, even the Nintendo Switch Pro. When you get that user in your forums who wants support for their flight stick from 1998 and you know you're never actually going to write it yourself, the Steam Input API might help you solve a problem like that. There are more than 17 million registered controllers on Steam. Xbox One and 360 controllers make up a huge portion of that, as you'd probably expect on PC. Amazingly, PlayStation controllers make up a quarter. So if you have interest in making your game better supported for PlayStation DualShock controllers on PC, the Steam Input API can help you make that happen. We're continuing to invest in VR with, of course, support for the Vive, the Rift, Windows, Microsoft MR headsets, and so on. We've seen a 79% increase in VR monthly active users from 2017 to 2018, which is exciting. We're also building our own content, new lighthouses, and the Knuckles input controllers. So we're excited about the future of VR. If you want to talk more in detail about that, come find me. Not really a big focus for this particular talk. The Steam Inventory Service is a really valuable tool. This is for games with persistent user items. If we can help save you, 100 labor hours of building UI and infrastructure and a backend server, you can plug right into the Steam version and use the same tools that Team Fortress and PUBG are using to serve inventory items to their customers. This is already integrated with the Steam Wallet and Trading and Marketplace, and it gives you a ton of control over your items. And I'm going to skip to the last slide because I'm just about out of time here. So a few last resources. If you want to sign up for Steam, read our documentation, or watch more videos and talks like this, thank you so much for coming. And please come say hi after the talk if you have any questions or want to talk more. Thanks, guys.